My name is Sarah Margaret Collins, and I'm 34 years old. I never thought I'd be sitting here, writing these words with trembling fingers, trying to make sense of how everything fell apart so completely. The irony isn't lost on me that I'm documenting the destruction of my family in the same leather-bound journal that once belonged to my grandmother, the woman whose secrets would ultimately tear us all apart. 3 months ago, I believed I knew my family. I thought I understood the dynamics, the love, the occasional tensions that bind relatives together. I was wrong about everything. What I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, like something from a Gothic novel, but every word is true. I lived it, breathed it, and watched it consume everyone I loved. It started with a phone call on a Tuesday morning in March. I was making coffee in my small apartment in downtown Portland, watching the rain streak down my kitchen window, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number with the New York area code. I almost didn't answer, assuming it was another telemarketer, but something made me pick up. "Miss Collins, this is Jonathan Whitmore from Whitmore, Hayes and Associates. I'm calling regarding the estate of Eleanor Blackwood." The name hit me like a physical blow. Eleanor Blackwood, my grandmother's maiden name, the one she never spoke about, the one that seemed to hang over our family like a shadow. My grandmother had been Eleanor Collins for as long as I could remember, having taken my grandfather's name when they married in 1954, but Blackwood, that was a name from whispered conversations, from the few times my mother had mentioned it, with a strange look in her eyes. "I think you have the wrong number," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't believe so, Miss Collins. You are the granddaughter of Eleanor Blackwood, formerly Eleanor Collins, are you not? She passed away 6 months ago, and we've been trying to locate her living relatives." 6 months ago, the same time my grandmother died, the same Eleanor Collins who had raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 12, the same woman who had been my rock, my foundation, my everything, but Eleanor Blackwood, that was someone else, entirely. "I'm sorry, but my grandmother's name was Eleanor Collins. She died 6 months ago." "Yes, but, Miss Collins, I understand this might be confusing. Could we perhaps meet in person? There are some documents I need to show you, and frankly, this isn't the kind of conversation that should happen over the phone." My hands were shaking now, and I had to sit down at my small kitchen table. The rain was coming down harder, and the gray March light made everything in my apartment look washed out and strange. "What kind of documents?" "Estate documents. Your grandmother left behind a considerable inheritance, Miss Collins, one that she specified should go to you, and only you. But there are complications." I flew to New York 2 days later, using the credit card I'd been saving for emergencies. If this wasn't an emergency, I didn't know what was. The law offices of Whitmore, Hayes and Associates occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in Midtown Manhattan, the kind of place that screamed old money and older secrets. Jonathan Whitmore was exactly what I'd expected. So varied, impeccably dressed, with the kind of quiet authority that comes from handling other people's darkest family secrets for 40 years. His office was lined with leather-bound books and had the scent of expensive cologne and old paper. "Miss Collins, thank you for coming. I know this must be very difficult for you." He gestured to a chair across from his massive mahogany desk, and I sat, feeling small and out of place in my department store blazer and scuffed shoes. "Before we begin, I need to ask you something. Did your grandmother ever mention the name Blackwood to you? Ever speak about her life before she married your grandfather?" I shook my head. She never talked about her past. When I was little, I asked her about her family, where she came from, but she would just get this sad look and change the subject. My mother said Grandma had a hard childhood and didn't like to remember it. Whitmore nodded grimly. "That's what I suspected. Miss Collins, your grandmother was born Eleanor Catherine Blackwood in 1934. She was the daughter of Charles Blackwood, a very wealthy man who made his fortune in real estate and investments during the post-war boom. When Eleanor was 18, she had a falling out with her father. A serious one. She left home, changed her name, and never spoke to her family again." "But she was poor," I said, confused. "She worked as a seamstress her whole life. She lived in a tiny apartment. If her father was wealthy, she was cut off completely, disinherited. Charles Blackwood was, by all accounts, a hard man, unforgiving. When Eleanor defied him, he removed her from his will and forbade the rest of the family from having any contact with her." I felt like I was learning about a complete stranger. The grandmother who had raised me, who had scraped together money for my school clothes and made my birthday cakes from scratch, had come from wealth. It didn't make sense. What did she do? What was the falling out about? Whitmore hesitated, and I could see him weighing his words carefully. She fell in love with someone her father disapproved of. Your grandfather, actually. James Collins was a good man, but he came from a working-class family. Charles Blackwood had other plans for his daughter. So she chose love over money. She did. And she paid for that choice every day for the rest of her life. Whitmore reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a thick manila folder. Charles Blackwood died in 1987. He left everything to Eleanor's younger brother, Marcus, with one condition. If Eleanor ever returned to the family, if she ever asked for help or tried to claim her share of the inheritance, Marcus would lose everything. That's horrible. It gets worse. Marcus died 3 years ago, childless. His will left everything back to the Blackwood estate, with instructions that it should go to Eleanor if she was still alive, or to her descendants if she wasn't. But here's the thing, Miss Collins, Marcus knew Eleanor had died. He had been secretly keeping track of her for years, though he never contacted her directly. I felt a chill run down my spine. Someone was watching my grandmother. Not watching, exactly. But Marcus hired a private investigator to check on her periodically. He knew about you, about your parents' accident, about Eleanor raising you. He knew everything. The implications were staggering. While my grandmother had struggled to pay for my school supplies, while she had worked her fingers to the bone to make ends meet, her brother had been living in luxury, knowing exactly how hard her life was. How much money are we talking about? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. The current value of the estate is approximately $47 million. The number hit me like a physical blow. I actually gasped, my hand flying to my chest. $47 million? More money than I could even conceptualize. But there's a problem, Whitmore continued. Marcus's will contained a clause that your grandmother never knew about. The inheritance can only be claimed by Eleanor's direct descendants, but only if they can prove they are worthy of the Blackwood name. What does that mean? It means you have to undergo a series of tests, challenges, designed by Marcus before his death. They're meant to prove your character, your worthiness to carry on the family legacy. But Miss Collins, I have to warn you, these tests are not what they seem. Marcus was a complicated man. He blamed Eleanor for their father's hardness, for the way the family fractured. Part of him wanted to help her descendants, but part of him wanted revenge. I stared at him, trying to process what he was telling me. Revenge for what? For leaving, for choosing love over family, for being everything he could never be. Whitmore leaned back in his chair, studying my face. Miss Collins, I've been handling family inheritances for 4 decades. I've seen what money can do to people, especially large sums of money. I've seen families destroyed by greed, by resentment, by the weight of inherited guilt. This inheritance, it's not just money. It's a weapon that's been waiting 40 years to detonate. I should have walked away right then. I should have thanked Jonathan Whitmore for his time, gotten on a plane back to Portland, and pretended this conversation never happened. But $47 million is a number that changes everything about how you see the world, how you see your possibilities, how you see your worth. What kind of tests? I asked. Whitmore pulled out another folder, this one sealed with red wax. Marcus left very specific instructions. The tests are designed to be completed over the course of 6 months. They involve your family, Miss Collins, your entire family. Everyone related to Eleanor Collins must participate. My entire family. I thought about my relatives, my Uncle David, my grandmother's son, who lived in Seattle with his wife Patricia and their 2 children, my cousins Michael and Jennifer, my Aunt Ruth, my grandmother's daughter, who lived in Chicago with her husband Paul and their daughter Emma. We weren't a large family, but we were close. At least, I thought we were. Everyone, Whitmore confirmed. The tests are designed to reveal the true nature of family bonds. They will test loyalty, honesty, sacrifice, and love. But Miss Collins, I must warn you again, Marcus designed these tests to be divisive. He wanted to prove that Eleanor's descendants were just as capable of betrayal as he believed she was. What happens if we fail? The money goes to charity. All of it, and any family member who participates in the tests and fails will be forbidden from ever claiming any portion of the inheritance, even if the tests are repeated. I felt sick, and if we succeed, then you inherit everything. But success requires unanimous completion of all tests by all family members. If even one person fails, everyone fails. The weight of what he was telling me settled on my shoulders like a lead blanket. I wasn't just gambling with my own future. I was gambling with my entire family's future. And I had to convince them all to participate in tests designed by a man who wanted to destroy us. How long do I have to decide? The tests must begin within 30 days of this meeting, or the inheritance is forfeit. I left Whitmore's office in a daze, walking through the Manhattan streets without really seeing them. I found myself in Central Park, sitting on a bench watching joggers and dog walkers go about their normal lives, while my entire world had been turned upside down. I called my Uncle David first. Sarah, what's wrong? You sound terrible. Uncle David, I need to tell you something about Grandma. Something I just found out. I explained everything, from the phone call to the meeting with Whitmore. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. $47 million, he said finally. Yes, and we all have to participate in these tests. Yes. Another silence. Sarah, your grandmother never told us any of this. Not a word about the Blackwood family, about being cut off, about any of it. I know, this feels wrong, like we're being manipulated. I know that too. But even as Uncle David expressed his doubts, I could hear the change in his voice. $47 million was a life-changing amount of money. It was retirement for him and Aunt Patricia. It was college funds for Michael and Jennifer. It was security, freedom, possibilities that none of us had ever imagined. I need to talk to Patricia, he said. And the kids. This affects all of us, of course. Sarah, are you sure about this lawyer? This whole thing sounds like something from a movie. I understood his skepticism. It did sound impossible. But I'd seen the documents, the official seals, the bank statements. This was real, I'm sure. Uncle David, I wish I wasn't, but I'm sure. I called Aunt Ruth next. Her reaction was different, more immediate. We have to do it, she said after I'd explained everything. We have to try. Ruth, it's not that simple. These tests are designed to divide us. Then we don't let them. We stick together, we support each other, and we get through whatever this Marcus person has planned for us. What if we can't? What if the tests are impossible? Then we fail together. But Sarah, think about what this money could mean. Emma's medical bills, Paul's surgery, that insurance won't cover, the house we're about to lose. This inheritance could save us. I hadn't known about the house, about Paul's surgery. My family had been struggling more than I realized, and suddenly, I understood why the inheritance felt less like a gift and more like a lifeline. There's something else, I said. The tests have to be completed by all of us. If even one person fails, we all lose everything. Then we make sure no one fails. Ruth's confidence was infectious, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into a trap. Marcus Blackwood had had 3 years to design these tests, 3 years to craft his revenge against Eleanor's family. He wasn't going to make it easy for us. The family meeting was scheduled for the following weekend at Uncle David's house in Seattle. I flew back to Portland first, needing time to process everything that had happened. But I couldn't focus on anything. I kept thinking about my grandmother, about the woman I thought I knew versus the woman she actually was. I went to her apartment, which I'd been slowly cleaning out over the past few months. It was a small one-bedroom in a working-class neighborhood, filled with the modest possessions of someone who had lived carefully with money. But now I looked at everything with new eyes. In her bedroom closet, behind a box of old photographs, I found a small wooden jewelry box I'd never seen before. Inside was a single piece of jewelry, a gold locket with the initials EB engraved on the front. I opened it. Inside was a tiny photograph of a young woman who looked exactly like me, standing next to a young man I didn't recognize. On the back of the photograph, in my grandmother's handwriting, were the words, Eleanor and James, 1952, the day we decided to choose love. The photograph changed everything for me. Suddenly, my grandmother's story wasn't just about inheritance and family secrets. It was about love, about sacrifice, about a young woman who had given up everything for the man she loved. And it was about the price she had paid for that choice every day for the rest of her life. I thought about the times I'd seen her staring out the window with a distant look in her eyes, the way she sometimes touched her throat as if reaching for a necklace that wasn't there. I thought about how she'd never complained about our circumstances, never expressed regret, but also never talked about the past. The weekend in Seattle was tense from the moment I arrived. Uncle David and Aunt Patricia were clearly divided about the inheritance. David was cautious, worried about the risks, while Patricia was more like Ruth, focused on what the money could do for their family. "We need to think about Michael and Jennifer," Patricia said as we sat around their kitchen table. "This could pay for their college, give them opportunities we could never afford otherwise, or it could destroy our family," David countered. "Sarah, you said this Marcus person designed the tests to be divisive. What if that's exactly what happens? What if we turn against each other?" Michael, who was 19 and home from community college, had been quiet through most of the discussion. "What kind of tests are we talking about?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "The lawyer wouldn't give me details. He just said they're designed to test loyalty, honesty, sacrifice, and love." "Sounds like a reality TV show," Jennifer said. She was 17, and everything about this situation seemed to fascinate rather than worry her. "This isn't a game," David said sharply. "This is our family we're talking about." "Exactly," Patricia said. "And our family deserves this money. Your mother lived in poverty for 60 years because her father was a monster. She deserves to have her family benefit from the wealth she was denied." Ruth and Paul had driven up from Chicago with Emma, who was 15 and dealing with ongoing medical issues that had been draining their savings. The financial pressure on their family was visible in the way they looked at each other, the tension in their voices when they talked about the future. "I think we have to try," Paul said. "The worst thing that can happen is we fail, and we're right back where we started." "No," I said, "that's not the worst thing that can happen. The worst thing is that we succeed and discover that the money isn't worth what it cost us to get it." "How can you say that?" Emma asked, her voice small. "Mom and Dad are about to lose the house because of my medical bills. How can money not be worth it?" The guilt in her voice broke my heart. This 15-year-old girl was carrying the weight of her family's financial problems, blaming herself for circumstances beyond her control. "Emma, that's not your fault," I said gently. "But it is my reality," she replied, "and this inheritance could change that reality for all of us." In the end, we voted. It wasn't unanimous, but it was close. 5 in favor, 2 against. Uncle David and Michael were the holdouts, but they agreed to participate if the majority wanted to proceed. "We stick together," Ruth said as we prepared to leave Seattle. "Whatever these tests throw at us, we face them as a family. And if it gets too intense, if we start turning on each other, we stop." David added, "The money isn't worth destroying what we have." We all agreed, though I wondered if we'd remember that promise when we were in the middle of whatever Marcus Blackwood had planned for us. I called Jonathan Whitmore the next day to inform him of our decision. He scheduled a family meeting for the following Friday in New York, where he would explain the first test. "Miss Collins," he said before hanging up, "I want you to know that I tried to talk Marcus out of this. I told him that using an inheritance to manipulate people was cruel and potentially illegal. But he was determined. He said your grandmother had made her choice, and now her family would have to live with the consequences." "What did he mean by that?" "I think you'll understand once the tests begin." The week passed slowly. I couldn't concentrate on work, couldn't sleep properly, couldn't stop thinking about what we were about to face. I researched Marcus Blackwood online, trying to understand the man who held our future in his hands. What I found wasn't reassuring. Marcus had been a successful businessman, but he'd also been known for his ruthlessness. He'd been married twice, both marriages ending in bitter divorces. He'd had no children, no close friends, no one who seemed to mourn his passing. He'd lived alone in a mansion on Long Island, surrounded by wealth and bitterness. The more I learned about him, the more I understood that these tests weren't just about proving our worthiness. They were about making us suffer the way he believed Eleanor had made him suffer when she chose love over family loyalty. The night before we were supposed to fly to New York, I had a dream about my grandmother. She was young, maybe 20 years old, standing in a grand house I'd never seen before. She was arguing with an older man who looked like an older version of Uncle David. "You can't make me choose between love and family," she was saying. "They should be the same thing." "Love is a luxury we can't afford," the man replied. "Family is responsibility. Family is duty. Family is everything. If family requires me to give up the person I love most in the world, then family isn't everything. Family is a prison." I woke up with tears on my cheeks. finally understanding what my grandmother had sacrificed and why. Marcus had never forgiven her for it. We met at LaGuardia Airport, all 7 of us, carrying small suitcases and large amounts of anxiety. The mood was tense, with people speaking in hushed tones and avoiding eye contact. "I can't believe we're doing this," Michael said as we waited for our taxi. "We're doing this for Grandma," Jennifer replied. "For all the years she struggled because of that horrible man. We're doing this for the money," David said quietly. "Let's at least be honest about that." Whitmore's office felt different this time, smaller somehow, as if the walls were closing in on us. We sat in a conference room with a long table, 7 chairs, and a single manila envelope in the center. "Before we begin," Whitmore said, "I need each of you to sign these documents. They're waivers, acknowledging that you understand the risks of participating in these tests and that you're doing so voluntarily." "What kind of risks?" Paul asked. "Legal risks, financial risks, personal risks." Marcus was very specific about the consequences of failure, and some of those consequences extend beyond simply losing the inheritance. I felt my stomach drop. "What kind of consequences?" "I'm not at liberty to say until you've signed the waivers, but I will tell you this. Marcus wanted to ensure that if Eleanor's family failed his tests, they would understand the full cost of failure." David pushed his chair back from the table. "This is insane. We're signing documents that could destroy our lives without even knowing what we're agreeing to." "Then leave," Whitmore said simply. "The door is right there. You can walk away right now and go back to your lives." "With the knowledge that we gave up $47 million because we were afraid," Patricia said. "With the knowledge that we protected our family from a dead man's revenge," David countered. Ruth reached for her pen. "I'm signing. My daughter needs medical care, and I'm not going to let fear stop me from trying to help her." One by one, we all signed, even David and Michael. The weight of what we were doing settled on the room like a thick fog. Whitmore opened the envelope and pulled out a sheet of paper. "The first test is called truth. Each of you must confess the most significant lie you've ever told to someone in this room. The confession must be made publicly, to the entire family, and it must be a lie that has meaningfully affected your relationship with the person you lied to." "That's it?" Jennifer asked. "That doesn't sound so bad." "The confession must be verified," Whitmore continued. "If any confession is found to be false, or if anyone refuses to confess, the entire family fails the test. Additionally, each confession will be recorded and stored in the estate files. They will become part of the permanent record." The room fell silent. I thought about the lies I'd told my family over the years, the small deceptions and omissions that had shaped our relationships, but the most significant lie, the one that had meaningfully affected my relationship with someone in this room. I knew immediately what mine was, and the knowledge made me feel sick. "We have to do this now?" Emma asked in a small voice. "You have 24 hours to prepare your confessions," Whitmore said. "Tomorrow at noon, you'll return here, and each of you will make your confession. The order will be determined by drawing lots." He pulled out a small wooden box with 7 folded pieces of paper inside. "Please, each of you, draw a number." I drew number 4. Ruth was first, Patricia second, Paul third, me fourth, David fifth, Emma sixth, and Jennifer seventh. "One more thing," Whitmore said as we prepared to leave. "You cannot discuss your confessions with each other before tomorrow. If anyone is found to have collaborated on their confession, the entire family fails." We spent that night in a hotel near the law office, each of us alone with our secrets and our fears. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about the lie I would have to tell, the relationship I would have to damage, the trust I would have to betray. My lie was about my parents' death. The family had always been told that my parents died in a car accident, that it was sudden and unexpected, that they hadn't suffered. But I knew the truth because I'd been there. I was 12 years old, sitting in the back seat of our car as we drove home from my school play. My parents had been fighting, their voices getting louder and angrier. My father had been drinking, something he'd been doing more and more frequently. My mother was threatening to leave him, to take me away. "You can't take Sarah from me," my father had said, his words slurred. "She's the only good thing I've ever done." "Then stop drinking," my mother had replied. "Stop drinking and be the father she deserves." My father had turned to look at her, taking his eyes off the road. "I can't," he'd said. "I can't stop." That's when the other car hit us. My father's moment of distraction, his inability to stop drinking, his moment of vulnerable honesty about his addiction, had killed them both. I'd never told anyone what had really happened in those final moments. The police report said it was an accident, that the other driver had run a red light, but I knew my father's drinking had contributed to the crash, that his emotional state had made him careless. My grandmother had raised me, believing my parents had died through no fault of their own, that they'd been victims of a random tragedy. If I told the truth now, it would change how she remembered her son, how the family remembered him, but it would also explain things about my relationship with my Uncle David that had never made sense. David had always been distant with me, not unkind, but never fully warm. I'd always assumed it was because I reminded him of his brother's death, but the truth was more complicated. David had suspected what I knew. He'd seen the signs of his brother's drinking, had tried to intervene, had failed. He'd spent years wondering if he could have done something differently, if he could have saved his brother, and he'd looked at me and wondered what I'd witnessed, what I knew, what I was carrying. The next morning, we returned to Whitmore's office. The conference room felt like a courtroom, with all of us sitting in judgment of each other and ourselves. Ruth went first. Her confession was about money. She'd been stealing small amounts from her mother's purse when she was a teenager, money that Eleanor had needed for groceries and bills. She'd let Eleanor believe she was more forgetful than she actually was, had watched her grandmother struggle with money while taking what little she had. I was 17, and I wanted things, Ruth said, tears streaming down her face. I wanted clothes and makeup and movies with my friends. I told myself she wouldn't miss $5 or $10, but she did. She missed every penny. Patricia's confession was about her marriage to David. She'd had an affair 3 years earlier, a brief relationship with a coworker that had ended when she realized she was about to destroy her family. She'd never told David, had carried the guilt alone, had let it poison their relationship with secrecy and shame. I was lonely, she said, not looking at David, who sat frozen in his chair. You were working all the time, the kids were busy with their lives, and I felt invisible. It didn't mean anything, but it meant everything because I betrayed the person I love most in the world. Paul's confession was about Emma's medical condition. He'd known about her genetic predisposition to her illness because it ran in his family, but he'd never told Ruth before they decided to have children. He'd been afraid Ruth wouldn't want to have kids if she knew there was a risk. So he'd kept quiet and let Emma suffer the consequences. I wanted a family so badly, he said, his voice breaking. I thought maybe the gene wouldn't be passed down, maybe we'd be lucky. But I took that choice away from Ruth, and I gave Emma a burden she carried for the rest of her life. Then it was my turn. I looked around the room at my family, at the people I loved, at the relationships that were about to be forever changed by what I was about to say. My lie is about my parents' death, I began, and I saw Uncle David's face go white. The family has always been told it was a simple accident, that Dad wasn't at fault. But I was there. I saw what happened. I told them everything. The fight, the drinking, the moment of distraction that had caused the crash. I told them about the guilt I'd carried for 22 years. About the way I'd protected my father's memory at the cost of my own honesty. I'm sorry, I said to Uncle David. I'm sorry I let you wonder and worry and blame yourself when I knew the truth. I'm sorry I let you carry guilt that wasn't yours to carry. David's confession came next, and it was the one that broke my heart. He'd known about his brother's drinking problem, had known about the fights with my mother, had known the marriage was in trouble, but he'd also known something else. My grandmother had been sending my parents money she couldn't afford because she was worried about their financial situation. I told her to stop, David said. I told her that giving James money was just enabling his drinking, that she was hurting more than helping. I convinced her to cut them off financially, and they died 3 weeks later. I always wondered if the stress of losing Mom's support had made things worse, if I'd contributed to the accident by convincing her to stop helping. Emma's confession was about her medical bills. She'd been deliberately not taking her medication sometimes, trying to reduce the cost of her treatment, trying to ease the financial burden on her parents. Her condition had gotten worse because of it, requiring more expensive treatments, creating the very problem she'd been trying to solve. I thought I was helping, she said, crying. I thought if I could just get better on my own, if I could just be less expensive, maybe you wouldn't have to worry so much about money. Jennifer's confession was the simplest and somehow the most devastating. She'd known about her mother's affair because she'd seen the text messages, She'd known about the fights, the lies, the way her parents' marriage was falling apart, but she'd also known something else. She'd been the one to tell her father about the affair, anonymously, through a note left on his car windshield. "I thought you deserved to know," she said to David. "I thought Mom was being unfair by not telling you. But I also thought maybe if you knew, you'd fight for your marriage instead of just letting it drift apart." The silence that followed Jennifer's confession was deafening. We sat in that conference room, 7 people who had shared secrets that would forever change how we saw each other, how we saw ourselves, how we saw our family. "Are we done?" Ruth asked quietly. "With the first test, yes," Whitmore said. "You have all successfully completed the truth tests." "Successfully?" David laughed bitterly. "We've just destroyed our family." "How is that successful?" "Because you were honest," Whitmore replied. "Because you chose truth over comfort, revelation over concealment." Marcus believed that Eleanor's family would be too cowardly to face their own deceptions. He was wrong. "What's the second test?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "The second test is called sacrifice. You have 1 week to prepare." "A week to prepare for what?" "Each of you must identify the thing you value most in your life, the thing you would be most reluctant to give up. Then you must give it up, permanently, as a demonstration of your commitment to your family's success." "That's insane," Michael said. "We can't just give up the things that matter most to us." "You can," Whitmore said. "The question is whether you will." We left the office in a daze, our family forever changed by what we'd revealed to each other. The walk to the hotel felt like a funeral procession, each of us carrying the weight of our own secrets and the burden of everyone else's. That night, we gathered in Ruth's hotel room to talk about what had happened. The conversation was painful, full of tears and recriminations and attempts at forgiveness. "I can't believe you knew about the affair and didn't tell me," David said to Jennifer. "I can't believe you had an affair and didn't tell me," David said. To Patricia, "I can't believe any of us thought we could keep secrets from each other," Ruth said. "We're family. We're supposed to trust each other, but we don't," Paul said quietly. "That's what today proved. We don't trust each other enough to tell the truth." "So we learn," Emma said. "We learn to trust each other. We learn to be honest. We learn to be the family Grandma wanted us to be." "Is that what she wanted?" Michael asked. "Or is that what we're telling ourselves to justify what we're putting ourselves through?" I thought about my grandmother's locket, about the photograph of her and my grandfather, about the choice she'd made to leave her family for love. Had she wanted us to be honest with each other? Had she wanted us to face our secrets and our shame? Or had she wanted us to be better than the family she'd left behind? "I think she wanted us to choose love," I said, "the way she chose love over money, over family expectations, over everything else. She wanted us to choose each other." "Then why does it feel like we're tearing each other apart?" Patricia asked. "Because choosing love isn't easy," I said. "It requires sacrifice. It requires honesty. It requires forgiving each other for being human. And if we can't," David asked, "then we fail the tests, and we go back to our lives, and we try to rebuild our relationships without the money. But with the truth," Ruth added. "Whatever else happens, we can't go back to lying to each other." The week between the first and second tests was the hardest week of my life. I couldn't stop thinking about what I valued most, what I would be most reluctant to give up. The obvious answer was my career, my independence, my sense of self. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that what I valued most was something more intangible. My role as the family's moral center. Ever since my parents died, I'd been the one who mediated disputes, who offered advice, who tried to keep everyone together. I'd been the responsible one, the reliable one, the one everyone turned to when things got difficult. But what if giving that up was exactly what my family needed? What if my constant need to fix everything was actually preventing them from learning to fix things themselves? The thought terrified me, but I knew it was true. My sacrifice would be stepping back, letting my family struggle without my intervention, trusting them to find their own way through their problems. I called each family member during that week to check on them, to see how they were processing the first test. The conversations were stilted, awkward, full of the weight of our new knowledge about each other. David and Patricia were in counseling, trying to work through the revelations about the affair. Michael was angry at everyone, feeling betrayed by his mother's deception and his sister's manipulation. Jennifer was defensive, insisting she'd done the right thing by revealing the affair. Ruth and Paul were dealing with their own crisis. As Ruth struggled to forgive Paul for not telling her about the genetic risk before they had Emma, Emma was caught in the middle, blaming herself for her parents' problems while also dealing with the knowledge that her father had essentially gambled with her health. "I don't know if we can survive this," Ruth told me during one of our phone calls. "I don't know if our family can survive these tests. We have to try," I said. "We've come too far to give up now. But what if the cost is too high? What if we destroy ourselves trying to prove we're worthy of money that might not even make us happy?" It was a question I couldn't answer, a fear that kept me awake at night. Were we chasing an inheritance that would ultimately curse us? Were we letting a dead man's revenge succeed in tearing us apart? The second test took place in the same conference room, but this time the atmosphere was different. We were no longer strangers to each other's secrets. We were wounded, fragile, but somehow more honest than we'd ever been. "Before we begin," Whitmore said, "I need to explain something about the nature of these tests. Marcus designed them to be cumulative. Each test builds on the previous one, and the stakes get higher with each success. The second test, sacrifice, is significantly more challenging than the first." "How much more challenging?" David asked. "The sacrifices you make must be permanent and public. They will be documented, verified, and made part of the permanent record. There is no going back once you commit to your sacrifice." Ruth went first again. Her sacrifice was her career as a nurse, the profession she'd worked in for 20 years, the work that defined her identity and gave her purpose. She'd already submitted her resignation letter, effective immediately. "Nursing was the thing I was most proud of," she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "It was how I helped people, how I made a difference in the world. But Emma needs me more than my patients do. My family needs me more than my career does." Patricia's sacrifice was her pride. She'd written letters to everyone she'd hurt during her affair, including David's family, her coworkers, and her children's friends' parents. She'd confessed publicly to her infidelity, accepting the social consequences and the damage to her reputation. "I spent so much energy trying to hide what I'd done, trying to protect my image," she said. "But hiding it was hurting David, hurting our marriage, hurting our family. I'd rather be known as someone who made a terrible mistake than someone who lies about her mistakes." Paul's sacrifice was his business, a small construction company he'd built from nothing over 15 years. He'd sold it and donated the proceeds to medical research for Emma's condition, giving up his life's work to help find a cure for other families facing the same challenges. "I built that company thinking I was securing my family's future," he said. "But what good is financial security if my daughter doesn't have a future? What good is success if it comes at the cost of the people I love most?" My sacrifice was the hardest to explain because it was so intangible. I'd written letters to each family member, formally removing myself from my role as the family mediator. I'd promised not to offer unsolicited advice, not to try to fix their problems, not to step in when they were struggling. "I've been trying to be your mother, your grandmother, your keeper," I said, "but you don't need me to fix your problems. You need me to trust you to fix them yourselves. You need me to be your cousin, your niece, your family member, not your caretaker." David's sacrifice was his resentment. He'd been carrying anger about his brother's death for 22 years. Anger at James for drinking, anger at himself for not doing more, anger at me for knowing the truth and not sharing it. He'd written a letter to James, a letter he'd read at his grave, forgiving him and letting go of the rage that had poisoned his relationships with everyone who reminded him of his brother. "I've been punishing Sarah for her father's mistakes," he said, looking at me with tears in his eyes. "I've been punishing myself for not saving him. I've been punishing everyone because I couldn't accept that sometimes people we love make choices that hurt us. And there's nothing we can do to change that." Emma's sacrifice was her guilt. She'd written a manifesto about living with chronic illness, about the burden of feeling responsible for her family's financial problems, about the way medical costs can tear families apart. She'd published it online, sharing her story with the world and accepting the vulnerability that came with public disclosure. "I've been carrying guilt that wasn't mine to carry," she said. "I've been blaming myself for being sick, for costing money, for being a burden. But I'm not a burden. I'm a person who deserves love and care and medical treatment, regardless of what it costs." Jennifer's sacrifice was the most shocking. She'd legally changed her name, giving up the Collins family. name and taking her mother's maiden name instead. She'd also written a public apology to her father, taking responsibility for the way she'd revealed her mother's affair and acknowledging the damage her actions had caused. I thought I was protecting Dad by telling him the truth, she said. But I was really trying to control the situation, trying to force a resolution that should have come naturally. I was being manipulative, and I hurt people I love because of it. Whitmore nodded slowly as Jennifer finished her confession. You have all successfully completed the sacrifice test, he said. But I need to warn you about the third test. It's called loyalty, and it's designed to test whether your commitment to each other is stronger than your commitment to the inheritance. What does that mean? Michael asked. It means that the third test will require some of you to choose between the money and your family members. Not everyone can pass the loyalty test. Some of you will have to fail deliberately in order for others to succeed. The room fell silent. After everything we'd been through, after all the truth and sacrifice, we were being asked to turn against each other. That's not fair, Emma said. We've been working together, supporting each other. Why would Marcus want to divide us now? Because he believed that when real money was on the line, Eleanor's family would show their true nature. He believed you would sacrifice each other for personal gain, just as he believed Eleanor had sacrificed her family for personal happiness. But that's not what happened, I said. Eleanor didn't sacrifice her family for personal gain. She made a choice about how she wanted to live her life. Tell that to Marcus, Whitmore replied. Tell that to the man who spent his entire life believing his sister had abandoned him for a man she barely knew. How does the loyalty test work? Ruth asked. You'll be given individual scenarios, situations where you'll have to choose between your own success and another family member's success. The choices will be made privately, and the results will be revealed simultaneously. If even one person chooses personal gain over family loyalty, the entire family fails. But you said, some of us have to fail deliberately, Patricia said. How is that different from choosing personal gain? Because the people who fail deliberately will be doing so to ensure their family's success, not their own. They'll be proving their loyalty by sacrificing their own chances. We spent the rest of the day walking through Central Park, trying to process what we'd learned. The third test felt like a trap, a no-win situation designed to make us turn against each other. Maybe that's the point, David said as we sat by the pond, watching ducks swim in lazy circles. Maybe the real test isn't whether we can pass all of Marcus's challenges. Maybe it's whether we can recognize when enough is enough. You mean walk away? Jennifer asked. I mean choose our family over the money. Choose love over greed. Choose to be better than Marcus was. But we've come so far, Ruth said. We've sacrificed so much. How can we just give up now? Because maybe giving up is winning, I said, suddenly understanding what David meant. Maybe the real victory is refusing to let a dead man's bitterness destroy our family. Easy for you to say, Paul said. You're not about to lose your house. You're not watching your daughter suffer because you can't afford her medical care. And you're not watching your marriage fall apart because of secrets and lies. Patricia added, We're all suffering, Emma said quietly. We're all being hurt by this process. The question is whether the money will fix our problems or just create new ones. That night, we had dinner together at a small restaurant near our hotel. The conversation was subdued, full of the weight of everything we'd revealed to each other, everything we'd given up, everything we still had to face. I keep thinking about Grandma, Michael said. About what she would want us to do. She'd want us to choose love, I said. She'd want us to choose each other. But she also lived in poverty for 60 years because she made that choice. Ruth pointed out, she struggled every day because she chose love over money. Maybe she'd want us to be smarter than she was, or maybe she'd want us to be exactly as brave as she was, Jennifer said. The third test was scheduled for the following Monday. We spent the weekend in a state of suspended animation, knowing that whatever happened next would determine not just our financial future, but the future of our family relationships. I found myself thinking about my grandmother's locket, about the photograph of her and my grandfather, about the choice she'd made to leave everything behind for love. Had she ever regretted that choice? Had she ever wondered what her life would have been like if she'd stayed with her family, accepted their money, lived the life they'd planned for her? Sunday evening, I called my Uncle David. I've been thinking about the loyalty test, I said, about what it means to choose family over money, and I think I know what we have to do. What's that? We have to fail on purpose. All of us. Together. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. You mean walk away from $47 million? I mean choose to be the family Grandma wanted us to be instead of the family Marcus wanted to destroy. Sarah, I can't ask Patricia to give up this money. I can't ask my kids to give up their future. You're not asking them to give up their future. You're asking them to choose a different future. A future where we're not defined by Marcus's bitterness, where we're not dancing to a dead man's tune. What if you're wrong? What if we could pass the loyalty test and get the money without destroying our family? Then we'd spend the rest of our lives wondering if we loved each other or if we just loved the idea of being rich together. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, with the kind of persistent drizzle that makes everything look washed out and hopeless. We gathered in Whitmore's conference room one last time, 7 people who had been through hell together and were about to face the final test. Before we begin, Whitmore said, I need to give you some additional information about the loyalty test. The scenarios you'll face are based on real situations from Marcus's life. Moments when he felt betrayed by the people he trusted most. He handed each of us a sealed envelope. Inside is your individual scenario. You'll have 30 minutes to read it and make your choice. Your choices will be made simultaneously, and the results will be revealed together. I opened my envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a scenario that made my blood run cold. Sarah Collins. It read, You have been selected to make the final choice for your family. You can choose to pass the loyalty test and inherit the full $47 million, but only if you agree to cut off all contact with one member of your family permanently. The person you choose will be disinherited, forbidden from receiving any portion of the money, and banned from having any contact with the rest of the family. Choose wisely. I looked around the room at my family, at the people I'd grown up with, fought with, laughed with, loved with all my heart. How could I choose one of them to sacrifice? How could I destroy someone I loved for money? But then I realized something. This wasn't really a choice at all. This was Marcus's final trap, his ultimate test of whether we would choose love or greed. And suddenly, I knew exactly what I had to do. I stood up, still holding the paper, and looked at each member of my family. I don't know what scenarios the rest of you have, I said, but I know what mine is asking me to do. It's asking me to choose money over family, to sacrifice one of you for the inheritance. What are you going to do? Ruth asked. I'm going to do what Grandma would have done, I said. I'm going to choose love. I tore up the paper and let the pieces fall to the conference table. I refused to participate in this test, I said. I refused to let Marcus Blackwood turn us against each other. One by one, my family members followed suit. Ruth tore up her paper. David tore up his. Patricia, Paul, Emma, Michael, Jennifer, all of them tore up their scenarios without even reading them completely. We choose each other, Ruth said. We choose to be a family. We choose love over money. David added. We choose to be better than Marcus was. We choose to honor Grandma's memory by making the same choice she made, Emma said. We choose love. Whitmore watched this display with an expression I couldn't read. When we were all finished, when the torn papers littered the conference table like confetti, he reached into his briefcase and pulled out another envelope. There's something else, he said. Something Marcus left for you if you made this choice. He opened the envelope and pulled out a letter written in shaky handwriting. This is from Marcus Blackwood, he said, and began to read. If you are hearing this letter, it means you have chosen to fail my tests rather than turn against each other. It means you have chosen love over money, family over inheritance, each other over wealth. It means you are truly Eleanor's family. I designed these tests to prove that Eleanor's descendants would be as selfish and grasping as I believed she was. I wanted to prove that given the choice between money and family, you would choose money every time. I wanted to prove that Eleanor had destroyed our family for nothing, that her choice had been meaningless. But you have proven me wrong. You have shown me that Eleanor's choice was not meaningless, that love is not weakness, that family is not just about blood and obligation and duty. You have shown me that Eleanor was right to choose love over money, right to choose happiness over security, right to choose her own path over the path others had planned for her. I have spent my entire life hating my sister for leaving me, for choosing a man over her family, for abandoning the Blackwood legacy. But now I understand that she didn't abandon our family. She created a new one. a better one, a family that chooses love over money, that chooses each other over everything else. The $47 million is yours, all of it, not as a reward for passing my tests, but as an apology for putting you through them, not as payment for proving your worth, but as acknowledgement that you were always worthy, not as inheritance from the Blackwood family, but as a gift from Eleanor's family to Eleanor's family. Use it well. Use it to take care of each other, to support each other, to love each other. Use it to honor Eleanor's memory and to build the kind of family she always wanted you to be. I'm sorry for the pain I've caused. I'm sorry for the tests, for the manipulation, for the way I've tried to turn you against each other. I'm sorry for spending my life hating my sister instead of trying to understand her. Most of all, I'm sorry I never got to know the family she created. You are her greatest achievement, her most lasting legacy. You are living proof that love is stronger than money, that family is stronger than bitterness, that forgiveness is stronger than revenge. Take care of each other, love each other, be the family Eleanor always knew you could be. The letter was signed Marcus Blackwood and dated 3 years earlier. We sat in stunned silence for a long moment. Then Ruth started crying, and soon, we were all crying, holding each other, overwhelmed by the weight of what we'd been through and the magnitude of what we'd just inherited. He planned this, David said through his tears. He planned for us to choose love over money. He gave us the inheritance because we didn't want it, Patricia said, because we were willing to walk away from it. He gave us the inheritance because we earned it, I said. Not by passing his tests, but by failing them, by choosing each other. 3 months later, I'm writing this final entry in my grandmother's journal. The money has changed our lives in ways both big and small. Ruth was able to get the best medical care for Emma, who is thriving now. David and Patricia used couples therapy to rebuild their marriage, stronger than ever. Paul started a new business, one focused on helping families dealing with medical expenses. Jennifer and Michael both went to college, pursuing their dreams without financial worry. But the most important change isn't about money. It's about us. We're closer now than we've ever been, bonded by the truth we've shared, the sacrifices we've made, and the choice we made to love each other more than we loved the idea of being rich. We gather every Sunday for dinner, all of us, and we talk about everything. No more secrets, no more lies, no more pretending. Everything is fine when it isn't. We've learned to be honest with each other, to support each other, to choose each other over everything else. Sometimes I think about my grandmother, about the choice she made to leave her family for love, and I understand now that she wasn't just choosing my grandfather. She was choosing the possibility of a different kind of family, a family built on love instead of obligation, on choice instead of duty, on forgiveness instead of resentment. She was choosing us, the family we became, the family we chose to be. And in the end, that choice was worth more than $47 million. It was worth everything.